This is a horror film with a supernatural twist, rooted in the myth of the Tooth Fairy as a vengeful spirit. The movie centers around Kyle Walsh, a young man haunted by a terrifying encounter with the Tooth Fairy and the curse she brings to those who see her. The film dives into themes of fear, trauma, and the power of light against darkness. The story begins in the small town of Darkness Falls, where a tragic legend has haunted the community for over a century. Matilda Dixon, an elderly woman from the town, was known for her kindness, particularly toward children. She would give them coins in exchange for their lost baby teeth, earning her the affectionate nickname of the Tooth Fairy. However, a terrible accident left Matilda disfigured and sensitive to light, forcing her to wear a porcelain mask and stay in darkness. One night, two children went missing, and the townsfolk wrongly blamed Matilda, believing her to be responsible. The mob stormed her home, condemning her to death by hanging. As she burned in the flames, she cursed the town, vowing revenge from beyond the grave. The children later turned up safe, revealing Matilda's innocence too late. Ever since, her vengeful spirit has returned to kill anyone who sees her in the dark after losing their last baby tooth. Matilda's ghost, known as the Tooth Fairy, is said to linger in shadows, only attacking under cover of darkness. In the present day, young Kyle Walsh is a normal boy living in Darkness Falls, but one night he experiences something terrifying. After losing his last baby tooth, he goes to bed, feeling uneasy. That night, he catches a glimpse of the Tooth Fairy, the ghostly figure of Matilda Dixon, hovering over him in his room. Following the lore, he knows that once you've seen her, she will haunt you, waiting for any moment you're in darkness to strike. Panicked, Kyle tries to hide under the covers, but he knows that she's still there, lurking, watching him. He manages to escape his room, screaming, alerting his mother. But when she tries to calm him, she enters his dark room, unaware of the danger. Tragically, she falls victim to the Tooth Fairy right in front of Kyle. Traumatized, Kyle becomes obsessed with light, convinced it's the only way to protect himself from the ghostly figure. Kyle's encounter is dismissed as a hallucination, and his claims about the Tooth Fairy's curse are brushed off as a result of trauma. He's sent away for psychiatric treatment, and the townspeople label him as unstable. Though he eventually leaves Darkness Falls, the memory of that night never leaves him. 12 years later, Kyle has grown into a young man who remains haunted by his childhood encounter. To this day, he suffers from a deep fear of the dark and carries flashlights and other sources of light with him at all times. Despite years of trying to overcome his fear, he's unable to shake the paranoia that Matilda's vengeful spirit still hunts him, waiting for him to be vulnerable in the dark. Meanwhile, back in Darkness Falls, Kyle's childhood friend Caitlin Green is facing a crisis. Her younger brother Michael has begun experiencing night terrors similar to Kyle's, terrified of the dark and claiming that a monstrous figure is watching him. Concerned and desperate for answers, Caitlin reaches out to Kyle, the only person who might understand what her brother is going through. Reluctantly, Kyle returns to Darkness Falls, the very place he spent years trying to forget. Despite his fears, he knows that he has to confront his past, especially if it means helping Caitlin and her brother. When he arrives, he finds that Michael is indeed tormented by the same dark figure he once encountered, reigniting his belief in the Tooth Fairy's curse. The townspeople, however, remain skeptical, dismissing Kyle's experiences as mere superstition or psychological trauma. Kyle's return to his hometown brings back painful memories, and he is quickly reminded of the stigma he faced as a child. The locals remember him as the disturbed boy who claimed to see the Tooth Fairy, and they're wary of his presence. But Kyle is determined to face his fear head-on, convinced that Matilda's spirit is real and that it has now targeted young Michael. As Kyle spends more time with Caitlin and Michael, he notices that Michael's fear of the dark has intensified. The boy insists that a dark figure lurks in the shadows, watching him, waiting for a moment when he's alone in the dark. Caitlin tries to reassure Michael, but as Kyle observes the boy's terror, he realizes that Matilda's spirit has indeed set its sights on Michael, just as it did with him years before. To protect Michael, Kyle begins reinforcing the Green household with as many light sources as possible, understanding that Matilda's ghost can only strike in darkness. He covers every room with lamps, flashlights, and even emergency light sources, determined to keep the boy safe from the spectral threat. However, this act only deepens the townspeople's suspicion of Kyle as they begin to question his mental stability once again. Kyle also tries to warn Caitlin and others about the Tooth Fairy's curse, explaining that Matilda's vengeful spirit cannot tolerate light and will only attack when shadows surround her. But convincing others proves difficult, as most people in Darkness Falls still regard the tale as a myth or old wives' tale. Yet Caitlin, seeing her brother's fear and Kyle's sincerity, begins to believe that there might be truth to his story. Meanwhile, skeptical townsfolk continue to question Kyle's sanity, with some even believing he might be a threat to the town. The local authorities, especially a few officers who remember Kyle's traumatic past, grow concerned about his influence on Caitlin and Michael. They see his his behavior as potentially harmful, accusing him of stoking fear in the already frightened boy. One officer, suspicious of Kyle's intentions, decides to keep a close eye on him, further complicating Kyle's efforts to protect Michael. As tensions rise, Kyle becomes more desperate to prove that the Tooth Fairy is real. He starts investigating the town's history, searching for any evidence that might convince others of the curse's reality. He uncovers stories of other children who went missing after claiming to see the Tooth Fairy, discovering a long-hidden pattern of disappearances that coincide with children losing their last baby tooth. Realizing that the curse has plagued the town for generations, Kyle's resolve to stop Matilda's spirit intensifies. He believes that if he can expose the truth behind the legend, the townspeople will finally believe him, and they can protect Michael together. However, time is running out as Matilda's spirit grows bolder, her dark presence becoming more aggressive around the Green household. Kyle continues to reinforce his strategy against the spirit, using various light sources to ward off her attacks. But the ghost of Matilda seems almost omnipresent, lurking in every shadow, waiting for a moment to strike. Each time the lights flicker or dim, a chilling fear settles over the house, and Kyle is reminded of his own terrifying encounter years ago. The challenge becomes increasingly exhausting, as keeping Michael safe requires constant vigilance. With each passing day, Matilda's curse grows more powerful, as though feeding off the fear she instills in Michael and Kyle. The ghostly figure grows more relentless, her attacks intensifying as she attempts to catch them in moments of darkness. Kyle realizes that confronting her directly might be the only way to put an end to the terror she has inflicted on Darkness Falls. Desperate, Kyle gathers whatever resources he can find, searching for ways to ward off Matilda for good. He constructs an elaborate system of flashlights, lamps, and other makeshift lights to keep his surroundings illuminated at all times. Yet he knows that these are only temporary solutions. They may not hold her back forever. Kyle decides that his only chance of ending the Tooth Fairy's curse is to find a way to lure Matilda's spirit out and expose her to powerful, constant light. With Caitlin's reluctant help, he devises a risky plan to trap her, hoping it will give them the upper hand. Michael's terror, however, only increases, and Kyle must summon all his courage to face the darkness that has haunted him since his childhood. As he prepares for a final showdown, Kyle reflects on his journey, realizing that he must overcome his own fears if he is to protect those he cares about. The stakes are high, and he understands that this might be his last chance to stop the vengeful spirit from claiming another life. In a final sequence of suspenseful moments, Kyle and Caitlin set up an intricate network of lights around Michael's room and throughout the house. They brace themselves, knowing that Matilda's spirit is drawn to fear and will do whatever it takes to shroud them in darkness. As shadows begin to close in, Kyle and Caitlin prepare for one last attempt to face the darkness and put an end to the curse once and for all. If you've enjoyed this recap, please give it a like and subscribe. It will help bring more exciting recaps for you to enjoy. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.